Hello and welcome to the Ruth McFit podcast. I'm very happy to be here as always. I'm starting with a quote. In order to be happy, you need to have the courage to be disliked. It might be an indirect quote because I can't remember the exact quote, but it really stuck with me. And it made me think about how much of our time and energy is spent trying to keep the peace, please others, and avoid conflict, even when it comes at the expense of our own happiness. What happens when we stop doing that? When you listen to your gut, protect your energy, and choose yourself over obligation. I had a very real moment this past week, and I will share it with you because I know that so many of you struggle with this too, and not just in big situations, but in everyday life. Saying no, setting boundaries, and dealing with the discomfort that sometimes comes with that. So, let's talk about protecting our inner peace, why emotional stress can physically affect us, and how you can start setting boundaries without guilt. I'm going to start by sharing a message with you that started all of this thinking, this pondering. I haven't had any communication with my dad for about 13 years. And the reason for that is quite simple. And it's that every interaction in the past has been verbally abusive, passive aggressive, and he is very reliant on alcohol. The thing is, I know that people can change, and I truly believe that. But I also know that you can't make someone change. And I was at peace with this, having not spoken to him for so long. But last week, I got a message and it just said, "Hi, it's Dad." And I sat with it for a moment. And then I did reply because I know that I'm always here telling you how people are capable of changing. I said that I'm sorry I missed the message and asked him if all was okay. His next message did confirm everything for me. It was passive aggressive. It was laced with guilt and manipulation. And I immediately felt uneasy. And I didn't know why. Why was I letting this man make me feel uneasy? And then I realized that it was my body telling me to do something. I was scared of going down that road again, and I could just draw a line and make sure this didn't happen. His message had asked me, amongst other things, to pass his details to my brother and sister, and that he wanted to see us. And I had a choice. I could get into a back and forth where he would just get more abusive. I know that would happen. Or I could make a clear decision. So I said, I'll pass on your details, but I won't be meeting up with you. And that was it. I felt relieved. I'm so glad I sent that. I felt proud of myself that I'd just been strong. I'd protected my inner peace. But his response confirmed why I'd made the right choice. He replied with, "Who do you think paid for your holidays as a child? It certainly wasn't mother or your stepmom." And for a moment, I caught myself thinking about those holidays, Wales when I was 5, Suffolk when I was 6 or 7. And then it hit me. I was like, taking your child on holiday isn't a transaction. It's not something they then owe you as an adult. He chose to take us away. Anyway, it doesn't give someone permission to then be abusive to you. And it was a reminder of why we have to protect our energy. You can feel it, the drain from people who take more than they give, who twist reality, who make you feel bad about things that weren't your choice. And I know this is a boundary that was easier for me because I didn't grow up with him. He left when I was 2. Here's what's really interesting. My half brother, who I just call my brother because he's essentially my brother, he did grow up with him. And despite being raised by someone who constantly put others down, who used manipulation, who was emotionally volatile, he has turned out to be an incredible human being. He is so lovely. He's quite a bit younger than me. He's 30. And if you needed any more proof that our past doesn't need to define us, he is it. We all have a choice in who we become. And just because we grew up in a certain environment, just because we were raised by certain people, doesn't mean we have to carry that behavior forward. I was sent a quote recently, and I'm going to, not a quote, but I was sent a story recently. I'm going to read it to you. Anyway, it's like the story of 2 brothers raised by an abusive alcoholic father. One brother grew up to be an abusive alcoholic father, and when asked, said, "How could I have turned out any different?" The other grew up to be a caring, hardworking, and loving father, and when asked, he said, How could I have turned out any different? We can break this cycle. It's something I see all the time in the work I do. Women who have grown up with diet culture perfectionism or that all or nothing thinking, who decide one day, enough. They decide to do things differently, and that is a choice. You know, I remember talking to my mum about how she spoke about size and weight. And she said, well, what do you expect? I always had it from my parents. And I was thinking, but you know how it made you feel. So why would you then do it? And I think it was just a habit. She didn't ever mean anything intentionally. It's just because it become a thing. But people, I hope, are deciding to do things differently now and are very conscious about this with their children. It is a choice. And what's also interesting is that the last couple of weeks, my back has been more sore than normal. Now, I train regularly, I know my body well, but I also know that stress isn't just mental, it's physical. So when my back starts to play up, I can see it as a sign. My body's giving me a signal that I'm a bit run down. And I had this a bit anyway. So I was already aware my back had started to play up. And I think then this week, I've been very tired. My back isn't getting better as quickly as I'd like. And I think it's probably because I'm emotionally drained. Now, my first problem with my back started when I had rheumatic fever. And there is actual science on this with regards to the neurological pathways between emotional stress and pain. When we are carrying that mental tension, we're feeling run down, it can show up as physical pain. Now, the way I had it described that I really liked is that if you've had an injury or a lot of pain in one area in the past, if we think of those neurological pathways, the well-used ones are going to be like a motorway, and the other ones, there might be like a B road or whatever. And it's much easier to send those signals straight down the motorway, and they go and they hit the place that you've had this pain before. So if you are finding that things flare up when you're stressed and so on, it's not that the pain's not real, it's just that it could be a sign that you are mentally carrying a lot at the moment. And that's why boundaries aren't just a mindset thing, they're essential self-care. Not every boundary that you make needs to be like the one I set with my dad to protect my own state of mind, time, energy, and so on. But it does remind me also of a conversation I had with a very good friend of mine, Kim. She is the friend that everyone goes to for reassurance. She was the one I spoke to about my dad. I was like, I need to offload on someone, please, because she's that friend. She's really good, but she's also a friend that would really struggle to say no. And I'm aware of this, and I wouldn't want to ask her to help me out too much because I would worry that she would say yes, even if she couldn't. But I'm very proud of her because she was then asked recently by a friend of hers to do something, and she didn't say sorry. She just was honest and said, I can't, I'm busy. And do you know what happened? Her friend said, oh, no worries, that's fine. Because her friend would expect her to say no, she couldn't do it. She wouldn't expect her to say yes and then get stressed about it and so on. There was no drama, no anger, because a friend's a reasonable person. And most reasonable people would expect us to say no sometimes. We spend so much time feeling guilty for even thinking about it. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I wish I could do that, but I'd feel so guilty, here's something to keep in mind. Guilt and discomfort are not the same thing. Guilt happens when you've done something wrong. Discomfort happens when you're changing a pattern. So if saying no feels hard, try this. Start with saying no to something small. Say no to a minor request and see how the person reacts. Or like my friend Kim does, she chose a friend of hers that she knows is quite direct and would easily say no herself because she thought, well, she says no to things. So if I say no to her, and again, it turned out fine. Don't then over explain it. Again, Kim didn't say sorry and go and over explain. When I sent that message to my dad, it was tempting to put in all the whys and the whereabouts and so on, but I didn't. You can just say no without a big exclamation about why. Notice how you feel afterwards. Do you feel more drained or actually do you feel relieved? Pay attention to that. And then if someone does react badly, then that is also information. Their response is about them, not you. You can't change how people feel. You can only do what you can do. You can't worry about what people will feel because how they feel is up to them. You can't worry about if people are going to like you because whether they like you or not is their choice. You can only do what feels right for you. The right people, though, they will respect your boundaries and they won't punish you for them. So here's the things that I want you to take away from this episode. You don't owe access to people just because they ask for it. You don't have to justify protecting your energy, and you don't have to carry guilt for making choices that prioritize your well-being. Happiness doesn't come from pleasing everyone. It comes from living in line with what feels right for you. So here's a challenge this week. See if there is one small boundary that you can get in place. Practice saying no without over explaining and notice how you feel. And if you are struggling with this, then I want you to know you're not alone. This is something that I had to work at, and I'm very proud that I did. It does get easier with practice, and sitting on it and waiting can often help too. Let me know if it did resonate with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't want you feeling sorry for me, by the way, although it is a cathartic sort of episode because I've got things off my chest. It's really a lesson that I think that we can all benefit from. As always, you can find me on Instagram at RuthMacFit. You can also find me on my website, www.ruthmacfit.com. And it would be great if you liked, shared, subscribed this podcast because it's always helpful for others to find it. Thank you as always. Until next time. Goodbye.